All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We got the inaugural Knife of Dreams episode, which is, as you say, one of the best of the Jordan written books, but the worst cover.
God,
The worst cover.
it's so bad.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Because uh
Let's analyze the cover for a second.
it seemed like we were starting to get some good ones. I'm trying to remember what the crossroads, but Winter's Heart was pretty good. Path of Daggers and Crown of Swords were pretty good
I thought
after.
Dragon Reborn was a good cover.
Um, and then this one is just terrible.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously supposed to be Perrin on the front, which I mean he looks
Yes.
like I don't know the poor man's Tim McVeigh. No wait, which McVeigh is it? That's the coach of the Rams. Tim McVeigh was the guy who blew up Oklahoma City.
Yeah, Sean McVay.
Sean McVeigh, yeah, with a really scroungy beard, not the beard that you would expect from the the description from Fail.
Why is he the smallest person there? Darn near as small as the as Galena, who I assume who that's supposed to be.
Galena,
Um,
Galena's the Red Sister.
oh yeah, who's the one that's captured here by the um is that not Galena that's captured by the Sanchin? Um Brain fart.
No,
I don't
Galena
know.
is Savannah's slave.
Yes. Yeah. And so minor spoiler, there's a point where he questions her later in the series. I thought that was earlier, but that might be way later.
And I assume the hulking, sad-looking Aiel is Gaul.
Yeah.
Woof, woof, woof.
It
Not quite stone faced there, and
yeah.
that's got to be Barrelane's general there, right?
Who looks like Sean Connery from the first Highlander movie.
And on the backside, that's one of the Asha Aman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't from the descriptions. I don't know which one. One of them had a mustache. I can't remember. But
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be the guy who looks like a farmer, but at least they got the coat right.
yeah, well, the parent is the most disappointing part, though. It's
By far.
it's. I mean, even the body is kind of like it's like old man fit, where the belly kind of
hmm
sticks out and
hmm
the pecs aren't quite there, and yeah.
Oh boy.
he looks he looks give him some more gray hair. He looks like he owns a boat where Instagram models take their pictures on. That's what he.
Oh,
Oh
it's
my
not funny because
goodness.
it's true.
Yeah, and
All
we'll try to
right.
get this out tonight. It should still be good. We're about 2 hours later than we normally start. I had a lunch meeting with a dad of an athlete. He's the fourth rated left-handed pitcher in Texas at 15 years old. But at 15 years old, his body's also breaking down because he's been playing
He's
year-round ball since he was like 5.
ugh.
So that's where I come in and try to make him right.
All right. Let's see. Where's our last Wheel of Time episode? Did we have any comments to go over?
Oh yeah, yeah, we did. Pause while we bring that up.
Um. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about this. All right. So, uh, Loyal many books ago told us about a man that came to the steading who seemed to be suffering from some sort of mental trauma. He explains that over time, the man appeared to get cured by the peace of the steading. We know that Ishi's one power torment of that man was cut off by the effect of the steading. I'm not convinced that Farstrider went to the Aelfin Ilfin, especially since the only two portals were one locked away in Tyr and the other in Rudine. Farstrider's knowledge of the snakes and foxes could be garnered by knowledge from the Ogier and information gathered from ordinary people over a long lifetime. That's actually I'd forgotten about Loyal's story and what who that was supposed to be, and I think the consensus is that was Jane Farstrider after whatever happened to him that made him um disappear and kind of lose his mind. uh The second part of that, though, I think is spoiler territory that we'll get into later in this book, so we'll leave it alone for now. Um, but I'd forgotten about that story, and I can't remember where that comes from. But it was really early on. I feel like it was like the first or second book that Loyal tells that story when he's explaining what the steading are. Um, so I feel like that might have been the second book.
Yeah, I believe so because that's when they first are really going in there looking for the portal stones.
Right.
Yeah. And that's actually where we get our history lesson on the Ogier is that book because there's so much interaction with Loyal.
Okay. Now I disagree with this one, but again, this is a little spoilery because I think this
Well,
is
I have a
fleshed out
disagreement
more
with it. I have a disagreement with it because I saw where Jordan was going with it.
about Tawan.
Yeah, about Tuan.
All right. I enjoy Matt's courtship of Tawan, but don't really care much for her character. I think it's her pettiness that annoys me. In many ways, she suffers from the female version of Napoleon syndrome, short man's disease. It's not a character trait I have much admiration for. I can see that from Crossroads, what we just finished off, which is where these comments are from. But I think that should dissipate once you get through this book and you actually get some points of view from her. And
Yeah,
you
and
see
this
that
is
it's not pettiness. I would call it rigidity. That it's she only knows one way, and that's the way she was raised. That's the Sanchin way, but more than just the Sanchin way, the court Sanchin, imperial Sanchin way. And even when she encounters something different, um, she sometimes expresses an understanding of it, but still says no, my way's the way.
well, and that's where I think Jordan was going with this. Her character arc is going from the second most powerful person in her empire to basically being courted by
Mm-hmm.
a commoner in another land, and that doesn't understand her ways. And not only that, so we're talking power is one thing that's already an integral part, but the culture she's in, we get in this prologue here from Suroth's perspective. Let me find the page here. Let's see. Suroth grimaced and sat up in the dark, and the sheet sliding down to her lap. It was so easy to forget Da Koval were there, even this Da Koval. And then you let slip things through you should not have. And she comes from a culture where someone of Matt's status would not even be noticed.
Yes,
And
that's a good
she's
point.
having to force herself. She's a couple ticks behind because she has to cognitively make decisions that aren't natural for her. And
And Matt is a genuine curiosity. You get that from this book as well. It's why I like the courtship in this book so much, is you see her even from Matt's perspective, and then later when we start to get points of view from her, that he's confusing. I mean, who is this guy? I mean, she starts out calling him toy because that's what he was when she saw him. But there's obviously something more there since
which
since
is which is a credit to her if you want to kind of start
Mhm.
fleshing her out, even though she's really skinny, is that same attitude from him that makes him a confusing curiosity to her is the same character traits that made Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve always pissed off at him, always treating him like the rascal, always treating him like basically getting him wrong. She wants to get him right, even though she doesn't understand it.
Hmm, it's a good point. Um, it ties into the next comment though, which Scott, I'm not sure if you've forgotten what happens at the end of this book, but we'll get to it. So I may have to save this one as well. Curiously, Jordan never lays out for us the things the soothsayer told Tawan. We get a few clues about it, but never the complete picture. Because of this, it's difficult to foresee what Tawan will do or say in certain situations. And that's true for Winter's Heart and Crossroads. That's what makes to me makes her interesting and mysterious is because you know something was said and we know that it upset her, whatever it was. And so we know that that's at least part of why she's studying Matt, and then why she goes along with him at the end of Winter's Heart, when she could have, unknown to Matt, she could have done more to stop him from taking her away. Um, but at the very end of this book, we actually do get a fairly good explanation. She says what the soothsayer says,
Okay, so I
pretty
went ahead and
pretty
made a note to
directly,
talk about it in the spoilers.
and
And the
then
last comment is all spoilers too.
is way at the end of the series spoiler, because
Yeah.
but it actually gave me a thought that I hadn't considered before. So anyway.
Yeah, but it's just the contrast between the women that have no feelings or intention towards Matt versus the girl who's curious about him, which is
Hmm.
why she starts to have feelings instead of just being pissed off by basically what pisses the women off the most. And this might get us canceled is the fact that they have already made a story about him in their head and he
I was
keeps
about to
defying it
say this ties in more
to
than I
what we
thought it
just
would to what
talked
we talked
about.
about on Wednesday.
Yeah, because they have created a persona for him that they want to be true, and he keeps proving it wrong, and that's why they keep getting pissed at him.
Mm,
He keeps proving her preconceived Tuan's preconceived notions wrong about being about men, about peasants, about people from this side of the ocean. All of these things she had preconceived notions about. He keeps proving wrong, and it just makes her fall in love with him.
mhm. Or at least stick around and be interested
Mhm.
rather than being pissed off. As you say, she goes, interesting. I wonder what this is all about. Let's explore this further, is kind of her attitude.
And her pettiness, part of that comes from the fact that in her home place, in her home environment, anybody who did anything to that extent in any way to her is dead.
Yes.
And she knows that. That's all she has to do is flick a finger. She doesn't even have to say anything. She would just flick a finger and it would be taken care of.
Hmm. All right. Well, let's get into the prologue here and see how far we can actually get. Uh,
Well, because they come out swinging.
yes, literally.
This is like that MMA fight where the guy comes straight out and goes for the flying knee. The other guy
Yep.
survives it, and then the fight just becomes a 3 round slugfest from there. That's this book.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Um, because we start off, uh, we start off with the flying knee, with the Superman punch, with Galad of all people, who oh, I found something cool here, and let me.
Sorry, you said Superman punch, and I just have to. It just flew in my mind. One of the most annoying 2 seconds of that entire series was when Avienda was getting her toe, and she was standing there getting beaten, and one of them threw a Superman punch
Yes.
at her, and I'm like, you don't throw a Superman punch unless you're faking a kick. Why would you fake a kick to someone who's not defending themselves?
Because for someone who doesn't know any better, they see the flying leap punch and they think, oh, that's to get more momentum and energy behind your punch. No, it's
Yeah,
not.
except your back leg is kicking away, so you actually lose energy in it. But that's
Exactly.
whatever.
Yes. The reason that works is because there's a feint which leaves the button open. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that the Superman punch, ooh, because it's Superman, so it's super powerful. No, no, it's just you you get a clear shot to the button if you do it right, and boop, down you go, because you don't have to hit that spot that hard.
Well, and usually, well, even then, usually you rarely see a Superman punch end up in a knockout, but it does stagger them and drop their hands so you can
Mm-hmm.
follow through.
Mm-hmm. Let me share real quick. For anyone who this is the wiki I've been using, is the fandom one, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole a couple weeks ago when we finished up with Crossroads, and I discovered statistical analysis on the Wheel of Time wiki page, and what this is a breakdown of word count, percentage, chapter, and it gives you uh the POV. So if you've ever wondered, hey, is this the first time we've gotten a POV for Galad? Well, you can look real quick, and there you go. This is the first time we get a POV from Galad, um, which which I is one of the reasons I love this opening so much, because it's a it's a minor character who we've gotten a fair bit of information about, but kind of to your point about Matt and the preconceived notions, when we're first introduced to Galad, we're introduced to him via Elaine's very negative feelings about him. And then even further on, when the boys show up in the Great Hunt, it's the same thing. It's her negative feelings, contrasted uh, why am I brain farting on her idiot brother's name?
Alwyn.
Uh, Gawain's, uh, not necessarily positive feelings, but um, debt to him, because Galad risks his own life to save his brother. And right there should be a clue that maybe Elaine's not such a great person. And then you finally, after all this time, get his own internal thoughts, and Isla, you actually get, okay, but who is this person really? And that's one of the many reasons I love this opening.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say a good or bad person. I'd say it to be a misunderstanding person because
Mm-hmm.
she's a child.
Mm,
She's a 16-year-old girl when we
that's a
first
good
meet her.
point. That's a good point.
And let me go back to our Be a Man or To Be a Man episode that hasn't aired yet, but we can talk about bits of it as we go because hopefully one day it does. Is the fact that there's so many things about your father that you hated when you were a kid,
Mm,
and as you grew up, you started to understand. Well, we're getting the parts of Galad that she didn't understand yet because we had her point of view. And also that's to be accompanied by his growth because he might have been that little twit back then. But then we saw in Geneva, no, the city where he meets up with Elaine and Nynaeve again.
J- Jenna or Gehenna, something like that.
Gehenna, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, yeah. Is he was having internal conflict of what he should do. He
Mm-hmm.
did the right thing, but it was also the wrong thing as a white cloak.
Yes.
And so he had to go through this difficult decision that basically realistically growing up in the palace you never have to deal with. You just
Mm-hmm.
know the rules and who should be following them. And
Mm-hmm.
the worst thing that's going to happen to Elaine because you told on her is her to get punished, and that's the best thing for her.
Mm-hmm.
Where here, the worst thing that could happen to Elaine is she dies.
Yo.
So now I have to make a decision: save my sister or be a good little white cloak. And
Well, and that leads right into my first note here, which is page 16, in the hardcover here. Um, where is it? Uh, so he, dang it, where is it? Where he says this? So he has this thought. He addresses um the his comrades who are following him, and uh he thinks that it was, oh, there it is. So it's down at the bottom, where so Trom, I don't think we've met before, Bayer and Dane Bornhold, young Bornhold, we have met before, so that's who's with him. And Trom tells him you know, it's understandable if you're having second thoughts, Demodred. It's a harsh accusation, bitter as gall, but no second thoughts for me. Galad broke in, etc., etc. But what about you three? You're taking a risk coming here with me, a risk you have no need to take. However the day However the day runs, there will be marks against you. This is my business, and I give you leave to go about yours. And I love this. I love this line, this thought of Galad's. It's so revealing. Too stiffly said, but he could not find words this morning or loosen his throat. So all of the complaints, all of the biased view of Galad we've had to this point, and just in that little sentence, Jordan is telling us Galad knows. He he knows what people think about him. He knows how he acts around other people. So he's not completely Aspergery. He recognizes that part of him, but he just can't. in his mind, it's the moment that's making him, stiff. But really, it's his own moral code, his own strict personal code makes it difficult for him to act like a normal person. And he doesn't know how to kind of merge those two parts of him. The part that knows that this is the right thing to do, this moral code, with the part of him that wants to be a nice person as well as a good and moral person.
Well, we'll add to it too. We'll get a little Freudian here. He had a very young age. His mother disappeared, and he was Morgase's son after that. And he, to get motherly approval, probably overcompensated as a rule
Mm.
follower at a very, very, very young age. Because I think they're saying because what's the difference in the age between him and Gawain? Because Gawain is Morgase's.
2 or 3 years, I
Yeah.
think.
So he's like a 2-year-old when he has
Hmm.
to start garnering approval from the new mother.
Hmm.
And the new mother being a queen
Yeah.
who sets the law. So he probably from a very young age tried to mark his place as the good son.
And much like with what where we kind of started with the comments, with how Tuan's character is colored by how she was raised, in a Byzantine palace. I would imagine it wouldn't have been that long before Galad understood that my new mother, this was all political. There is no affection here. This was
Yeah, I think
political to
there's
cement.
he's in a stage though
Yeah.
when it first happens that he doesn't understand that because he would have been about 2.
Right. But I would imagine it wouldn't be that many. He still would be a child when he comes to understand the you know the true nature of his family, that it's not a real family, and that's going to impact that as well. That's going to perhaps harden that idea of needing to be an ideal.
So I had to flip open my Freud notes here. That stage of his life by Freud was considered the anal stage. Now he's talking about things like potty training
Mm.
and learning to control your bowels and do it when you need to do it and not just when you're standing there or in your diaper. But it's just fitting that it's Galad that would be developing this mindset
Yeah.
during the anal stage because he gets to be pretty anal. But also at a very young age, that attention, any attention given to him was probably taken away when Gawain and Elaine were born
Mm-hmm.
because that's her real son. That's her real daughter. And he probably had to garner favor, but also you could see a little bit if you really broke it down, turning them in was slightly a little bit of vengeance too. Look how much better I am than them. Why don't you love me?
But I think there may with his genuine affection. That's why I love this example here. This
Well,
little
that's
sentence
why
of
that's
it
why I
that's
brought
too
up Freud
stiffly
because it's
said.
all unconscious.
Yes.
It's
So
not
that
I'm going to get them because they got all the love. It's this pattern that develops over time.
but there was probably also this, you know, uh, adding to the complexity there would be this element of wanting acceptance, that your own mother died when you were so young you can't remember her, and
Well,
now
and
you have this
you get
family.
yeah, you get a feel for it in Gehenna. I think it was Gehenna. You get a feel from it there because Jordan actually writes in the dialogue that he's wanting Elaine to love him too.
Mm,
He's wanting her to see him as his brother, as her brother.
that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. She uses that, and again, for all the hate on Egwene, I feel like more of that should be directed towards Elaine. That there are moments I think it's there, but also elsewhere, where she makes these pretty harsh comments about "you're not my brother." She says that directly or things to that effect. And yeah, I think that's one of those scenes where no matter if you say it, I am. And so I'm going to act like your brother, whether you like it or not, because you are my sister,
Mm-hmm.
whether you want it to be true or not. So you see that not only duty but affection, that familial bond that he has, or at least wants to have.
Well, and it makes you wonder too, because we know from his perspective here and in the subsequent books that, or even in the conversations from what we got with him and Elaine, he doesn't know Godwin's not doing his duty.
Mm,
If he knew that, would he be in Camelin now?
it's a good point.
If he knew that the prince, what is it, sword, the sword prince or
Sword
whatever,
Prince, yeah, yeah, I think
sword
that's what it's
prince
called.
is not doing his job, he'd be like, well, I'm the next one, it's my job now, and he would probably be there.
So jumping ahead to one of my next notes, because I think it fits here on page 22, when he's about to start the duel with Valda, and he tells him to watch the questioners, keep an eye on them. And so at the top of page 22, why? Even Asanawa can't interfere now. That would be against the law. It was very hard not to sigh again. Young Dane had been a child far longer than he, and his father had served his entire life. But the man seemed to know less of the children than he himself had learned. To questioners, the law was what they said it was. Just watch them. So the reason I wanted to point that out, highlight that, is Galad is portrayed by his sister as simple because he has a very strict and relatively simple moral code.
Yeah, and
But he's
according
not
to
a
her,
simpleton.
yeah, according to her view, the law would have been enough for him there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he's not simple just because he has a simple moral code. He he's savvy enough to catch these undercurrents, and the politics of what's going on. She wasn't the only one who learned politics growing up in the palace.
Well, and that to me is an advantage of also joining at a later age into something.
Mm,
That's why I hate the politics in my hometown, because the longer you've lived here, the more clout you have. But sometimes, as an outsider, you can come in and there's a lot of things that could be worked on
yeah,
that aren't being done because it's the way it's always been. And Dane is I mean, he inherited his ideals.
yeah.
And
It's why we've referenced Alexis de Tocqueville so much when we talk, politics and philosophy of America, because he was a very insightful, intelligent person, and he was an outsider traveling in America. So you get a different perspective than if you read commentary from contemporary people of the time.
yeah. Now it takes a special kind of person to be able to understand that this is why that culture is the way it is, and still be able to provide that insight. Otherwise, everything's going to feel off to you because you're an outsider.
I want to jump back just a second to page 16, because I had another thought that I wanted to get that note in because I thought it tied into what we were talking about with Galad and his character. But there's a moment here with Bayer as well
Mm-hmm.
that I like, and I think also is revelatory on uh I've referenced multiple times Critical Drinkers series of why modern movies suck, and a lot of it is the writing and the personal philosophy and moral outlook of the writers. And one of that is in villains. Not every villain needs to or should be sympathetic. The most obvious example would be uh, uh, Hitler. Okay, you watch the movie Downfall, or just watch the millions of memes from that one scene, and they make it understandable that this is someone who is losing his or has lost his mind, but they don't make it sympathetic. You can understand someone, and that doesn't mean you should have sympathy for them. There's a difference between making your villain understandable and making them a sympathetic character. And so here you have Bayer down at the starting at the bottom of page 16. I've done dark things in service to the light, gaunt-faced Bayer said grimly, his deep-set eyes glittering as though at a personal insult. Dark as moonless midnight, and likely I will again, but some things are too dark to be allowed. He looked as if he might spit. So
Was it Last Action Hero, which is like, you killed people? Yes, but they were all very bad.
No, that's True Lies.
That's True Lies,
True
True
Lies.
Lies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They were
But they
all
were all
very
very
bad.
bad.
Yeah,
That's
love
that's
that
that's
movie.
kind of the statement he just made there. He's like, I've done
Yeah.
really dark things, but this is beyond dark because he considered it was Galad's mother. She wasn't a dark friend.
Hmm.
His very dark things, he was pretty much convinced they were a dark friend.
Exactly. And so we've only, we've only seen that dark side of Byre so far when Perrin and Egwene are first captured in Eye of the World, and then when he shows back up in Shadow Rising in Emond's Field, and he's like a, I mean, you're arguing whether he's a psychopath or a sociopath, but he's not a likable person at all. And he's still not likable, but now you actually you get some depth there of he's more human, he's more understandable, which is going to create more depth to the character and make it more impactful when we see stuff that happens later on. We don't see it here in this book. It pops up in the next
Well,
book.
he's kind of like a more midwitty Dexter. Dexter did the very bad things, but he always made sure that they were very bad people.
Mm,
He had his code. So he could still be a psychopath. He just has his psychopathic code.
yeah. Uh and then they sword fight and it's great because Jordan knows how to write action.
Well,
Uh
usually we gloss over the action scenes, but I want to spend time on this. This
okay.
this this sequence actually could be a whole episode, but I'm going to resist the urge to talk too
Okay.
much on it. But this goes into what you were saying too, because of Galad, we get more from inside his own mind. We find out he's not the simpleton that Elaine thinks he is. We see character development, how he's learning what's real right from wrong and where the gray areas are, and how to navigate and pick a direction instead of a destination. And we see it in this fight. Because who's giving him advice? Was it Bornhold or Byre that gives him advice?
I think it's Trom actually who tells him that
No,
Valda likes to bleed his opponent. Or
I think it's Byre because Byre's helping
okay.
him take his
Oh yeah.
suit off. He likes to take him at the legs. Let's see. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Byre. Byre
Yeah,
put a
yeah. Okay.
gauntlet hand on his shoulder and leaned close. He likes to strike at the arms and legs. He likes to bleed an opponent until he can't take a step or raise a sword before he moves in for the kill. And then Galad goes into his preconceived notions about fighting. But then by the end of the fight, Galad learns from Valda how to be a different the sword fighter. And basically he becomes a swords master during the fight with the sword master. And it's because he has to overcome his preconceived notions, change the plan, and then actually strategize in a different way other than just being completely badass from a young age.
Hmm.
And so we see him grow into a swords master from someone who was just on the edge of it during
That,
this fight.
that's a good point because the last time we saw him was in Gehenna, where even these hardcore Shinarans who were used to fighting Trollocs, even they were kind of stepping back and looking at him with awe with the way he could so easily deal with multiple opponents. But of course, those were all, thugs basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, yeah, and so it's what we talked about, the difference between right and wrong, and then learning to be nuanced and navigate those areas where it can be very time and space specific. His idea of right was to finish the fight and be done.
Hmm.
Kill, get out, go home. But now he had to realize that, oh, that's not how this works all the time in the real world, because I've just met somebody who's better than me. You can't do that to somebody who's better than you.
It's a good point. All right. Uh, and when that finishes up, it cuts to Rodel Ituralde, or however he pronounces his name.
Yeah, I meant
I,
to look that up because every book we get into with him in it, I look in the back and it's not in there for the
mm,
pronunciation. And it's one of the hardest ones to. Yeah,
um,
let me see if I can find.
I didn't really have any thoughts on this except once again, Jordan knows how to write action well, but also he is smart enough and schooled enough in history to be able to show that he has told you that uh Ituralde is considered one of the great captains but now he's showing you that that is true. He's showing you why that is, and it's going to come up even more so later on when we get to see him even more. Um, did you have more thoughts about Suroth?
The Reddit, when I looked up the pronunciation, says Redel Iteralde, unpronounceable.
Unpronounceable. That is the pronunciation guide. Well, thank you.
Itu, yeah, Iteral, I, T. I mean, it rhymes Aldi. Yeah, okay. I guess we're pronouncing it right. It just sounds weird. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Maybe if we all had a different native language, it would. But
Um, I do like that for one of the few times where Jordan gives us things in sequence, and we actually see the direct consequence of the thing that just happened rather than having to wait a while and go, oh wait, that was the thing. Um, because of their air force, the Sanshin are able to send news much more quickly than the rest of this medieval world. So pretty much immediately after he strikes, we see the results of that with this meeting of the Sanshin High Command, looking at what's going on and making plans for how to stop it. Um, our through line on Wednesday was dangerous narcissism, and I love that we get that every time we get a point of view from a bad guy.
mm-hmm.
That Suroth's tone here, her train of thought, her way of thinking is so similar to the few times we've gotten uh, points of view from Black Hajal. It's still, you know, this is why this series works and the crap television series doesn't, is because Jordan was able to make the characters distinct even if they followed similar tropes or were in similar archetypes, because this is still her own distinct character. Soroth is her own distinct character, even if um, it's the tone of this section is similar to when we've gotten points of view from Leandrin or Galena or Phalion, I think is another one of the Black Jaw we've gotten a point of view from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very similar, but yet he still manages to make her voice distinct. Um, let's see here. Oh, and then Simmerhush shows up and it's delightful. To me, that's the most interesting part of this section is when Simmerhush shows up, uh, and what she has to say as well. Uh,
Yeah, and we talked about and we had comments on previous episodes of how Ishi and Lanfear are at the forefront because they're the most fleshed out. But we do get some fleshing on some of
mhm.
these others, and this is where we finally start to get to know her from Suroth's point of view. But at the same time, we finally start to get her character more than just Demandred thinking
Yes.
about her, or more than
So,
just Grendel thinking about her.
uh, uh, I shouldn't laugh at this, but I love dark humor. The bottom of page 46. Uh, this is Soroth talking. Great mistress, she said dully. The penalty for that is to be taken before the true empress, may she live forever, and have your entire skin removed. Great care being taken to keep you alive. After that, inventive if primitive, Simmerhaj broke in wryly. Yikes. Yeah, that little line says quite a bit, I feel, about who she is. Uh, again, we've heard what a sadist she is, and now we see it. We got a glimpse of it when we first saw her torturing uh
Yeah,
um,
hold on.
yeah, the Aes Sedai who Halima claims to be from, Kazban, I
Oh yeah,
think
yeah,
was.
yeah.
So we get a little bit of that when we see that, and now we get it even further when with that line, and then um but of no account. The Empress Radhanan is dead. Remarkable how much blood there is in a human body, enough to cover the whole crystal throne. Yeah.
Well, and for those that know anatomy well enough, one of the big things that movies and TV get wrong is all the blood everywhere when someone dies, because as soon as the heart stops, blood stops pouring out, unless you hang and bleed them. We know Semiraj doesn't want to kill somebody and then hang and bleed them. So she bled the whole time she was alive. She was alive till she had no more blood, is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why they always, it's so, some movies get it right where they stab someone directly in the heart and there's no blood. I want to say there was a World War II movie that did that. Inglorious Bastards.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, and then we get a switches to Pavara, which I don't have a lot to say about here because she we're gonna have more to say about her in the next book. Um, the most interesting thing to me here is when um Tsutama, the head of the Red, reveals the letter um that one of the Sashel, one of the uh, one of the Tower Aes Sedai who went to abduct Rand. And again, Jordan being a little uncharacteristic here is actually giving us the details directly. She alludes to the letter and then she just hands it over so that we, the reader, actually get to see the full text, which is astounding. You know, if you've been reading along, this is your first read through, and you go, "Wait, what? You're just actually going to tell me rather than hint at, and me having to piece it together over numerous accounts." So that's nifty. Uh, but they just go over their plan to bond. Um, and then again, I think the most interesting thing is what happens at the end of this scene, which is where who is it? The white sister who started all this, uh, Saren, comes rushing up to Pavara and Yukiri and tells them that um oh Sane, Saren was one of the other ones. Uh
Yeah, that was the
yeah,
meme I
yeah,
put on
yeah.
one of them where it was saying Saren, Cyrene,
Yep, yep,
Siren,
yep, yep.
Sorin. Yeah.
Um where Elida had summoned her and asked about how she wanted to know how I was getting on with discovering proof that Alviarin entered a treasonous correspondence with the Dragon Reborn. Really, she was so circumspect in the beginning, so indirect. It's no wonder I misunderstood what she wanted. And so then Yukiri and Pavara have an OS moment because they were at least confident that that was one person they could count on was not black and would be an ally to them since she's the one who set them to hunting the black in the first place. But oh wait, no, she didn't. This is all just internal party politics. Okay.
Who's the mole? That's the question.
Yeah. And then it's I don't think it's an accident that after that it switches to Alvier and her point of view, once again reiterating that uh, she will she will find a threat to the black if she has to make one up because that's um you know I wonder too if part of the point of that, besides just revealing Alvieren's character and revealing what's going on inside the the White Tower, is that Jordan just laying more kind of groundwork for how and why the dark is ultimately going to lose, which is, you know, in the same way that we saw the way the fascist powers, the Axis powers lost in World War II, and was also one of the reasons the Soviet Union ultimately crumbled, is when you create a system based uh, off of fear, well, it's not just the oppressed populace that is going to live in fear, it's your own people. So, I'll refer back to Downfall because I think it's one of the better movies that has been made in the last, 10, 20 years, especially if you know anything about that time of history. The reason for that iconic outburst, in part, besides the fact that he's nuts and he's drugged up, no one had the uh, cojones to tell Hitler the truth about how just. I mean, he knew the war wasn't going their way, but he really didn't have any idea just how bad it was because no one would give him the answers. No one would tell him. It was like six
So many good
months.
bad lip reading memes that came out of
Yeah.
that though.
On the other side of the world, I want to say
And
it was
you
like,
convinced us to use Ripeto's method of
yes,
squatting,
jeez. It was like
which
6 months before the Navy fully revealed to the Army and the Emperor and the cabinet just how bad the loss was at Midway. So they were operating for half a year under the assumption that everything was fine, and no, it wasn't. All right.
oh, we could probably meme that. There's the everything is fine meme.
Yes,
Yeah.
everything is fine.
Yeah.
Um. Oh wait, is this actually the part? Oh yeah, here it is. So this it's not much of a spoiler. So then it switches to um it actually switches to Galena's point of view. And then she gets nabbed by Gaul and one of the Ashaman. I don't remember which one. Feg or Niald. I think he's the mustachioed one. Um and gets brought before Perrin who has questions. Um I like the again the way it kind of ends is um Galena thinking, well, that there's nothing to it. I've told something straight out, so now I'm gonna have to kill these people to cover my tracks
Hmm.
because they can't know that I'm dark. They can't know that I'm a black and can lie. And then is this the last section of the prologue? Gawain. Um, yeah, yeah. So Egwene is the last section here, and we get to see what happens right after she was captured, which again, kind of a rarity, but he's kind of speeding towards the end here in part because he thought he could finish it before he died. Um, and we get a follow up right after something, which is fairly rare for him. Um, like take Crossroads, it's a good long while before we get back to Rand and see what happened after one of, if not the most momentous event of the Third Age, which was the cleansing of Sidon. And it's a long while before he goes back to it. But here we ended with Egwene being captured, and now right here at the end of the prologue, he actually jumps back to it to show us the immediate follow up. Um, and I had
Well,
a
I
general
think part
thought
of it
here.
is he wanted to strategically give us breaks from people, like he did with
Yeah,
Perrin,
yeah,
like he
yeah,
did with Matt, and like he did with Rand in book 3. Uh, but I think he was just done with that at this point. He was
yeah.
ready to start tying up all the ends he had put out there. And part of it might have been the motivation you just brought up. He thought he could get done, but part of it might have been the strategy from the beginning.
Mm. Um, that actually ties into the thought I had here, which was just a general thought. Because it's right here in this scene where on the last reread I did before we started doing this, one of the things that kind of prompted this, and this is where I texted you at the time several years ago that I think Egwene has the best arc of any of the characters as far as you know, the event to event to event and how it changes, how it changes her character, how it reveals her character, and the impact these events are going to have on later events, and it all kind of coalesces here for me. And I had this thought when I was skimming through a couple weeks ago was her arc is what Perrin coulda shoulda been. And I think it's in part the reason it works much better than Perrin's does is because we have big gaps throughout her arc where we don't see her. Or um what is it? I think it's in Winter's Heart where we never really see her except where she crosses over with Elaine and Nynaeve, and they're talking and updating each other on what's going on. And so she references some things that are happening in the Saladar Aes Sedai camp, but he doesn't take the time to show us, to give us details. He's just kind of letting us know stuff is still happening and she's still out there. But we have some pretty big chunks where we don't get an Egwene point of view. And I think that helps her arc in total, because we don't it doesn't become a slog. So, and we talked a little bit last time with Perrin, and we'll talk more here when we see Perrin, is that the climax of this kind of mini arc of Perrin's, from when he leaves Rand after Dumai's Wells to when he gets Fail back, that kind of mini arc. Uh, the high points, as we kind of talked about last time, the high points are pretty high. The problem is they don't have the impact, um, because the lead up turned into a slog. It turned into a grind. You know, it's yay, I finally finished this really long quest that I've been trying to do in this video game, except I can't enjoy it because it was an obnoxious grind to get to this point. And that's how Perrin's storyline feels to me. Whereas I think the depth of Egwene's events are more impactful because we don't get overloaded with what she's doing.
Well, and this is where I will give you a little bit of credit on that, even though Scott and I are not big fans of Egwene's storyline. The thing that is redemptive about it is we can see where it's going and what the price of it is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I love you, Fail. I can't do without you, my
Mm-hmm.
love, wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, and I think to Perrin specifically, if if we had not seen him for a while and then we come back to him and he's gotten worse, he's gotten darker, and then we jump away and we come back and he's even worse still, the impact of his decline would be more impactful. It would hit harder emotionally.
Yeah, and okay, so this is again where I'm going to give you credit and contrast the Perrin to Egwene. Perrin is sacrificing the good of the world for his personal feelings,
Mm-hmm.
where Egwene is a stubborn little schnit, little whatever you want to call her.
See you next Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah, she is that character to us now, at least some of us in our minds. But at least she's aiming for a goal she thinks is good for the world,
Mm-hmm.
not herself. Now she's putting herself at the center of it, a little bit narcissistic, but at the same time, she still does think that she's going to impact the Tarmangaiden and all of those things. The characters that we call the Schlog are putting the rest of the world to the side for their own personal feelings.
That's going to come up when we get to Elaine's chapters in this, because that's how I feel about Elaine's chapters
Mm-hmm.
in Crossroads and in Knife of Dreams. Is same thing. It's not, she's not throwing the whole world away like Perrin is. She's not aiming quite as high as Egwene is, but her egoism puts the lives of many ordinary people in danger, and ends up getting a lot of people killed. And she never has that moment of recognition and that moment of regret,
Well,
which is why I don't like her.
well, their big part of hers is if we were 100, if this is something I think is in the back of people's minds, but it's very subconscious, so that if I state it, they might go, "Oh yeah," is Elaine's not the only one that can do that job.
Mm.
If she could have thrown her weight behind Dylan and it'd be over by now. But she's so centered on the fact that I'm the only one that can do this. In the tower, we know Elida's not the person for the job.
She does say a couple of times, something to the effect of, Dylan, are you sure you don't want to do this? But it never struck me as serious. It was more of a just an
Things are
illustration of
difficult right now.
yes, of how
I want to be doing,
exasperated she is. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's like when someone just declares, I just want to die because, this or that thing is so terrible. All right, they don't really mean it
That's why
in
we
that.
love Matt
So,
so well, because he spends his whole time going, I don't want to do this, but okay.
but then he does it, and
Yeah.
what he does is genuinely heroic and genuinely good.
When ultimately that's Rand too. Even he has
Yes.
his moments of arrogance, but they're actually outbursts. The general notion of him is, I don't want this, but it's fated to happen, so I have to do it.
Uh, Speaking of fated and problematic, uh, I like that we cut from Egwene to now out of the prologue to the first chapter, and it's Sawan. So it's still in Egwene's story, but it's not from her point of view. Um, we we saw what she saw, and we got in her head of the plan she is making to how she is going to react to this imprisonment, and how she thinks this could be turned to an opportunity. And then we cut to now Jordan. Again, these scenes are doing double duty or triple or quadruple sometimes of showing us things rather than just telling. you know One of the great things about this chapter is he's showing us the impact Egwene has had on these much older, much more experienced Aes Sedai. And so it tells you something about who she is, as both a person, her intellect, and then as a leader, of being able to inspire these women to continue to follow her even after this event has happened. But also knowing that she kind of has to act fast and decisively, or things could go horribly wrong. And we start to see that a little bit in this chapter too, with who is it that comes up to Sawan at the end and is like, you know, Egwene's not gonna be, uh, Lelaine. Yeah, Lelaine comes up to her, and uh, I know I'm jumping way at the end, but the end of the chapter is Lelaine saying, Egwene Alver is the lawful Emerald seat until she dies or is stilled. Should either happen, we would be back to Ramonda, trying for the staff in the stole, and me forestalling her. That woman would be a disaster as bad as Elida. Unfortunately, she had enough sport to forestall me as well. We'd be back to that. Except that if Egwene dies or stilled, you and your friends will be as faithful to me as you have been to Egwene. So not only does she have to preempt anyone from coming to try and rescue her because she thinks that would just make things worse, she also knows, I need to let the Hall know I'm still here and I'm still in charge, or the factions that already exist are going to get worse. But my note on this is actually on page 105, 106, because there's this interesting internal monologue with Sawan, where she's kind of starting to sort of admit to herself what Egwene has already been thinking, and even I think said out loud a couple of times, that I think you're sweet on Gareth Brine. And she kind of sort of admits that to herself in these couple of pages, but then like squashes it down of, no, there's a focus. I've got important things to do. And this is one of the reasons, much like the Land Nynaeve naughty time that happens at the end of the first awful season of that awful show, the cringy lesbo lovin' ruins this moment. Because and it's not about the removal of innocence or naivety, for these stuffy puritanical people. It's about stripping who they are as people, as characters. That in order for characters to be impactful, you have to think of them as a person. They have to be a real person, and they have to have, you know elements that give them depth. And of course, this is one of the reasons you ruin that moment, is because one of the things that Jordan is doing here, that we've talked about last time, and we talked about kind of ad nauseum with Nynaeve, is that these are strong female characters, but they're even more so once they find that true partner, that person who really completes and complements them. That's when Nynaeve really elevates, exponentially, as a person, as an Aes Sedai, as a leader amongst these people, as a helping hand to Rand. Lan really elevates her because he helps her achieve her full potential, and the specific moment of that is the breaking of her block. That's kind of the specific, but that's really a metaphor for her as a person, of that he's able to help her break these mental blocks that she has in dealing with people, and being herself. And the same thing is happening with Siwan and Gareth Brine, that Siwan has been so hyper focused on being the ultimate blue, the perfect blue, and focused on this cause to the expense of everything else. And she's starting to grow now, in the same way that after Moiraine went through the rings, and she realized, as she says to Egwene, why are you acting like this around Rand? And Moiraine tells her, I remembered how to wield Saidar.
Well, it's kind of like the definition of wisdom, right? Knowledge and experience. And Moiraine had an opportunity to experience a lot of things that her mind was considering without dying from it. And so she was able to come out the other side and make better decisions because
Mm,
she had experienced something she lived through, but were bad decisions. That's really how wisdom is
that's a good
acquired. Is
point.
you make decisions through life, and if you're smart and if you're humble, you assess the results of those decisions and you take responsibility for them.
That's a good point. And it's revealed here in this particular instance. And I hadn't thought about this, but it goes back to where you were talking about at the very beginning, about uh the misconception the girls have about Matt, because they're projecting, and they're projecting the the scene they've already created in their mind of who he is. Well, Sawan has that idea about men in general, and about Gareth Bryan in particular, but now she basically lives with him. And so she's coming to understand who he really is, what motivates him, why he does what he does. And she's developed a grudging and then an open acceptance of that, of, oh, this isn't the bad person that I screamed at and called bad names back in the fires of heaven. That this is a genuinely good person, because of that experience she's having. She's gaining additional wisdom for someone who was already very wise, and we see that back in New Spring, when we see the contrast between her, who grew up on the docks, and Moraine, who grew up in a palace. And so she was already very worldly and wise because of that, but now she's getting an added dimension of that. But it's because of a man, so that's problematic, and we have to cancel Jordan.
Well, that's not as problematic because if you really think about it, it's not because he's a man, it's because of a relationship. It's her experience that garners the wisdom. He happens to be just part of that experience,
Mm-hmm.
a very necessary part of it. Now, she probably suffers with the. So, Chris Williamson asked a psychologist, Sadie Khan, are pretty women crazy? He asked her that question. And she had a very surprising answer. Her answer was, well, we can't really define crazy because her reaction to men is going to be based on her experiences.
Hmm.
And pretty women get men that are either the top of the hierarchy, the ones we talked about, the other day on self-selecting for these people that have no interest in any kind of long-term relationship because they don't have to, or anything less than that is going to be doting and lying. And that's their entire experience with men. Men will drop their current relationship to be with them. Men will buy them everything. Men will do this. Men will do that. Or they'll be the jerk.
Hmm.
And what do we get in Swan and New Spring? She's seducing the footmen. She's experienced men in Tyr before she was in the tower. She has pretty woman problem. And so her perception of men is based on her experience with men. And Gareth throws it all off because he's not intimidated. He's not doting. He's competent. He's not narcissistic. He's not giving her everything she wants right away. He's confident. He's
Hmm.
manly. He's masculine, as we talked about the real definition of masculine. And he's also a good man.
That's a good point. That ties all the way back to where this relationship first began. Um, when she's thinking so negatively about him when he shows up in Saladar, and she wants to just thump him over the head and get rid of him, or even kill him and get rid of him. And so the other Aes Sedai are, that was an interesting emotional outburst from Sawan Sanche of all people. What's this all about? And in her mind, and what she yells, she kind of yells at him about when they have a moment together is, are you so petty that you're still holding it against me after all these years that I set you down and embarrassed you publicly, 10, 20 years ago, however long ago it was that happened. um and he just wants to know why, and then he kind of laughs about it, which is not what she was expecting, because she's again she has painted this picture in her mind. She's not paint a picture. She's written a book. She has written a short story about who, go back to what we talked about Wednesday about the way women can, you know, how women can create the process in their own minds. And that's what she's done with him. She's written this whole story about who Gareth Bryan is, and he just wants to know why, kind of for the sake of his own curiosity, peace of mind, whatever. And then he kind of laughs it off, especially when he kind of gets out of her that, oh, it didn't come to be. It ended up not mattering because this guy got shot in the back by a farmer. And so he laughs it off. And I think that had to be the moment of begrudging understanding with Swan of, that is not what I was expecting. That is not who I was expecting. All right. I don't have any thoughts about chapter 2 really, because it's not going to matter a ton until later, when Egwene runs into Beonin. Uh, you do get some interesting things here where they're talking about, before she leaves the camp, some Aes Sedai come up and are talking to her about the murders that have occurred there, and she's, as a gray, as someone who has acted as a judge, has been involved in murder cases, and so she's, you know telling them what to do, and basically telling us the viewer what to do, us the reader, of look for these connections. What are these connections if you haven't made them already? um and then she sneaks on into the White Tower, and again another ominous ending, as Jordan has been doing both for the sections of the prologue and now the ends of these chapters, of it ending with Elida, you know, kind of greedily leaning over to the table and telling Bjorn, now show me everything. And so, oh crap. Now the tower is going to get the one advantage the Saladar sisters had, which was traveling.
Mm-hmm.
But he's kind of already set up that Elida doesn't trust anybody, doesn't get along with anybody. And so Elida's already said, you show me, you show the keeper, but no one else unless I say so. And so the main thing I like about this chapter is Bjorn slowly realizing, oh crap, I thought I was fleeing a sinking ship, but I think I just jumped into a sunk ship,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is the funnest part of that chapter. Uh, all right, just pause a second so I can get a refill because I assume you're going to have thoughts on chapter 3 because it's all about the Forsaken, and you love that.
All right.
All right, so chapter 3 is our first real meaty chapter, I think. There's some interesting things in the prologue, but chapter 1 and 2 were kind of, just the action is progressing, but whatever. Chapter 3, we get another meeting of the Forsaken, which we haven't seen, I think, since Winter's Heart, when they were told what Rand was about to do and that they were supposed to go do something about it. Um, so that's interesting in and of itself, but then I find it doubly interesting because of where the action is focused. Because the point of view is Arangar, and he's trying to create an alliance, so to speak, with Grendel.
We have to
So
be
so that's where the
consistent here,
action's
Heath.
focused.
We have to be
Dudes.
consistent here. We talk in all our other episodes about the biological difference between men and women. She. We have to use the proper pronoun here because she is a she. She's biologically a woman now. It doesn't matter what her soul is or what she identifies as.
Well, that's a weird metaphysical question that we can go down quite a rabbit hole of.
Well, you would be playing into that is part of queer theory.
Mm.
So you would be playing into their hand. Biologically, she's a female. Her mind is different. Her
Well,
her soul, because this metaphysics of this
yes.
place has a soul.
Yes and no, because we're told very early on, and then when we get a few glimpses of Halima's point of view, some really short snippets through the series, we see it happening that the mind will adjust to the body. Because when it first happens, she is shocked and outraged and a little bit horrified of what the hell have you done to me? And is told by Shaidar Heron that the mind will adjust to the body. So, and I don't remember if it's in this chapter or if it's one of the early, no, it's one of the earlier ones when she's waltzing through the camp, the Saladar camp.
Well, we get in this
And
chapter the sentence, her appetites have not altered, only broadened.
but there's
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember where it was. I think it was in an earlier point of view
When
where
she's burying
Halima,
the body.
yes,
Yeah.
that she has the thought that even when she remembers her previous life, she's now Halima. She sees the images of those, and the memories have altered so that she's always had this body.
Which is funny because is when we talk about they make a point, and this is why we hated this show so much, because they make a point that your gender is consistent through your lives. Lews Therin is a dude. He was not going to be a girl ever.
Guidel,
Now,
Kane, and Birgitte, all the
yeah.
stories we get about them from Birgitte's point of when she's talking about things. And every single time it's she's her and he's him.
What happens when Halima dies, though? And she spun out 1,000 years from now. Is it the soul of Bethamel, or is it the soul of Halima?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it depend on how long the soul spent in
Interessante.
that
Yeah,
body?
yeah,
Because you said it
yeah.
will become like the body, and it's becoming. Does it come out something halfway between?
Who knows? I'm trying to remember how Halima dies and if it's from Balefire, if or if it's some other way, then yeah, Jordan's gonna have to. Uh-oh, there's an
Like,
issue there
yeah.
at some point. All right, but
Well,
to the
luckily, we'll never
chapter.
have to deal with it because Sanderson said he will not do any of the other stuff. And
Mhm.
they're young though. Down the road, it's going to be like the Rolling Stones are on tour again. They're like 82, 83 years old.
Yeah,
And you got to wonder, did you need the money? Is that why you did
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Sanderson might be like, oh, things are tough lately and my new books aren't hitting. Hey, Harriet, what about the notes from those spin-offs?
Hmm. I actually feel like that would probably work better and be accepted better if they were spin-offs that didn't involve these characters. I know some of them do, but I think some of them don't. So I feel
Well,
like
the
those would
only
actually
notes
work
involve
well.
Rand and Perrin. Oh, not Rand, Matt and Perrin.
Matt and Perrin, yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember because I remember him talking about Outrigger novels that he might go back and do later after the series was completed. And I thought some of them um, didn't have to do with the main characters in the main story. It was more about fleshing out the world and
Mhm.
what was happening elsewhere. Anywho, so the other interesting thing about this chapter is that we Arngar is basically grooming Grendel. He's thinking about it in those terms that not just not just setting up a political alliance, but he's she's very much interested in the physical fun they could have as well. And he even thinks about when he's playfully, you know, stroking her hair or laying a hand on her shoulder that he Halima Arangar is acclimating Grendel to that touch to escalate it later. He's grooming. She's grooming and thinking about it in those terms, which probably means we have to be canceled now and this video is going to be banned because we said the G word. Um, but it's interesting to me on multiple levels, and one of those levels is you would think Grendel would recognize what's happening here. Now we don't get her point of view, so she might very well, but
Well, except we know one of the weaknesses of her is she likes being flattered.
yes.
That
So
that was how Samuel kind of got her
yes,
off guard too.
he flattered her and then he surprised her, and it took her off guard, so that she was suddenly doubting herself, which let Samuel eventually kind of become the top in that relationship. Um, but to your point that you made before we started recording, I think this is interesting that because of who Bethamel might be based upon, even if Grendel recognizes it, presumably she would still be susceptible to it because there are biological things that are going to happen. There are things that are going to happen on either a subconscious level or on a uh, how would you put it, on an endocrinological level, if that's
No,
a real word.
I might have been wrong though in my assessment because I was just looking at the cheat sheet on Balthamel,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a historian. He wasn't a
Mm.
psychologist. He was just a historian that loved to consort in the brothels and the such.
Oh, was he the one that where is it? Somewhere it says that someone specialized in ancient and archaic primitive civilizations.
Yeah. Which one was the psychologist? Because Ishi was the philosopher. Was it? No, Agenor was the biologist.
Yeah, because he Agenor is who created the Trollocs and other things.
But we'll save that for some other episode then, because I might have been wrong, but it just hit me because I thought he was a psychologist and his leanings here, but then also there was the comment by one of the other Forsaken about him getting lost in Egwene's dreams and not
Mm-hmm.
doing what he's supposed to do, and that was one that popped out because
Yes.
another point of interest of the person I was thinking of is dreams and
Yes,
their
you get that
effect.
reference here to Halima basically wasting time messing with Egwene's dreams. And we've already kind of suspected that because she's mentioned and thought about not only the headaches, but the fact that she's having really disturbing dreams, which shouldn't be happening as a dreamer. She's supposed to be able to control these things better. And now it's because it's just another thing Halima's messing with. But go ahead and expound on this idea because I think this is interesting, and I still think there's this could be true because even as a historian, if his focus was on primitive ancient civilizations, then rather than historian, you could think of him more as an anthropologist,
Mm-hmm.
which has a bent of sociology and psychology to it because it's basically those ideas but on a cultural civilizational level.
Well, so we were talking about if you don't know it by now, we brought his name up earlier, Freud, and you almost wonder if he was trying to get her to do his bidding by messing with her dreams, by trying to get implanted in her unconscious mind,
Mhm.
which is what you would do with grooming as well. He's trying to make those things natural and just get that creep going forward and forward and forward till they're diddling each other's diddle. So, but that's more your behaviorists. That's more your BF Skinners, your Thorndikes than Freud. He was more interested on the subconscious from what it can tell you about
Mhm.
somebody.
Well, I mean, that's the great thing. Why Jordan's characters are so rich is because even if you can find an influence, an analogy, whatever, it's never one thing. There's always multiple influences. And he's said in, in interviews and Q&As and things that, there had been times where someone asked him a question about what was this an influence for that, and he'd go, well, I never thought about it, but yeah, I can see that. So there were probably things happening on a subconscious level, just kind of mixing in all of this knowledge that he had floating around in the back of his mind. And then he wasn't necessarily thinking about that consciously, but it comes out on the page. Um, so I could see how, if I don't know how much he knew about psychology, the history of psychology, along with the theories of psychology, that there might be multiple aspects to who Balthamol was or is here, and what Balthamol is trying to accomplish as Arangar Halima. Um, I I do like also that there are, because I'd mentioned that one of the potential weaknesses of the climax of Winter's Heart was, I think, less than half of the still alive Forsaken bothered to show up. I can't remember exactly who showed up, but it feels like less than half.
But
And
we know Halima was there. We know Asengar was there. Uh, didn't Grindel peek but not engage?
yeah, I think she was the one who showed up, but made sure she showed up far away from what was happening and just kind of get to a point where she could watch and observe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can't remember. Sindane was there,
Yes, Sindane was
because
there.
I know we get a point of view of hers, and she's, livid that she should dare have to run from these primitives.
Yeah,
Um,
but we don't have Moradin. We don't have the Mandrid.
Morden wouldn't or couldn't show up, I would think, because of the connection he has with Rand.
Hmm.
That that is Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. I shouldn't have come. I'm endangering the mission. So besides the fact that he's the general, not the soldier, giving the orders, it might be that he thought showing up would do more harm than good because of that connection. That might be a problem. Um, but I do like that there are some consequences here, that Morden's kind of pissed at those who didn't show up, and uh, it pissed off at those who didn't show up, and mentions that there will be consequences. Oh, Masana was one of those because she didn't show up, and that was one of the reasons Shidar Herring shows up and does not nice things to her. Um, Now this is interesting, and the do you have any more general thoughts on this chapter? Because
No,
I have a thought here
depending
near
on where
the
you're
end.
going. Yeah.
So this is something specific. So on page 146, Samael appears to have
Okay, that's what I
resurfaced.
thought you were going to. So that's why I
Yeah.
wanted you just to keep going. Yeah.
Um, that hardly seems possible, Grendel said. He must be dead. Um, blah blah blah. Nevertheless, um, Samael, or someone disguised as him, gave orders to Murdral, and they obeyed. So it was one of the chosen. So we get a hint there, and we don't know how this works. But we can suspect that maybe it is something similar to the way Shaidar Heron marks Alviarin, so that followers of the dark and creatures of the shadow will recognize that she is directly under the Dark One's protection. So there may be something like that with all the Forsaken, because we know that the men have that uh, black cord that connects them to the Dark One, that basically protects them from the taint. So there must be some sort of something that marks the Forsaken as the Forsaken that lets them order Madral, and Madral know that they need to follow that order. Because one of the thoughts I had was, well, let's actually, I might need to save that for spoilers about
Marks.
who is giving who is giving Madral orders here. And we also get, so we get a hint of that, and then what exactly happened. Are you going to tell us what these orders were? Simmerharder's tone was cool. Morden's jaw tightened. I don't know, he said at last, reluctantly. He never liked saying that. But they sent 100 Murdrol and thousands of Trollocs into the ways. That sounds like Samael, Demandred said thoughtfully. Perhaps I was mistaken. A remarkable admission coming from him, or an attempt to hide being the one who had worn Samael as a disguise. This is, of course, Halima Arangar thinking this. Um, and then he goes on with you know, basically there's no more going your own way. The time of return is coming soon. So it's the pecking order has been established. No more jockeying amongst yourselves for position. Now we're all aimed at one goal. As you learn to your sorrow, he told Masana. So that was the hint of, you know, bad things will happen if you don't do what you're supposed to at this from this point on. Um, and then he mentions the seals, about finding the seals and whatnot. Um, and this is also interesting to me because I think this is an indication that Morden knows they are somehow connected. When here on 148 at the end, where Sindane, um, the easiest way to kidnap Luce Theron, the easiest way is to kidnap Luce Theron. I can make him tell where the seals are. No, Morden snapped, fixing her with a steady stare. You would accidentally kill him. The time and manner of Althor's death will be my choosing, no one else. I don't think that's just Morden being Morden, but he can get away with it because that's how he's always been. So the Forsaken
Well,
aren't necessarily going to be suspicious. But I think it's also, he's not sure what will happen if you kill Rand. Will I die too?
yeah,
Because of this weird
because we
connection
do
we
see a
have.
turnaround because he originally wanted to turn him, then by the end of Dragon Reborn was like, well, okay, I have to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And then he died, and then the Dark One brought him back, and then they crossed the streams, and now he doesn't want to kill him anymore. He
Yeah.
originally he had gotten to a point of, okay, well, you have to die now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're trying to speed along here because chapter 4 and 5 are, the first 5 chapters are kind of disjointed, which I'm fine with. I actually like that it's not one section like he usually starts off in sections of story, and he gives us 5 chapters from 5 different points of view in 5 different places to show us what's going on in the world. And then he's going to go to Matt and have a chunk of character chapters, and so that's why I'm trying to hurry along so that we can stop there and we can have a full Matt episode next time. Um, I don't have a lot of thoughts about chapter 4, a deal. This is Perrin. It was hinted at, that was kind of one of the bombshells at the end of Crossroads of Twilight. And now we're seeing this is actually happening, that Perrin is going to make a deal with the devil, literally as far as he's concerned, and uh, uh, temporarily ally with the Sanshin in order to get Fael back. And this ties into what we were ranting about earlier, that this would be a much harder gut punch if we had not seen Perrin for a while, or if we hadn't had so much of a slog in Crossroads. And um, and thinking, oh, geez, Perrin, what are you doing? What have you become?
Mhm.
Uh, but in and of itself, it's a pretty darn good chapter because in some ways, Perrin is still Perrin with how coarse he is. He doesn't, which throws the Shanshan for a loop in the same way that oh, I'm brain farting on her name. The Queen of Geldan was thrown for a loop just by him being who he is, and it completely threw her off balance. So much so that she swore fealty to him, which was something she was already kind of thinking about, but in that moment decided to do, and it was in large part because he's just being him. And here with the Sanshin general, he's just being him, and they don't know what to make of it.
So on page 156, we get a prophecy of the dragon from the Shanjin.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm glad he didn't name you the Wolf King, my lord. Otherwise, I'd think Tarmangane was on us. You know the prophecies of the dragon. When the Wolf King carries the hammer, thus are the final days known. When the fox marries the raven, and the trumpets of battle are blown. I never understood that second line myself. And you, my lady, Sir Pendrag, that would mean from Pendrag?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The prophecies of the from the Sanshin point of view are interesting because some of them are so different that you have to think, and I think we talked about this before, that Ishi had a hand in twisting them because he had a hand in creating Sanshin in the first place
Mm-hmm.
and sending uh, Arthur Hawkwing's armies across the ocean. So he had a hand in that, and you're strongly given to suspect that he might have had something to do with the twisting of the prophecies, so that they think they have to
Or he was trying to
subdue the
scatter
dragon.
them.
Well, that was part of it, is
Yeah.
because when
I
he
mean, I mean the prophecies themselves, not the
oh
people.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like he was like, okay, well, we can't do anything about all of this writing out there, but I can send it overseas.
um any other thoughts about this? Ends on another great dun 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 moment where he hands over the letter from Suroth that Barrelane's people stole from Massima. Of the bearer stands under my protection, and so the Tylee, the general, another great little minor character that comes out of nowhere and yet is fully fleshed out and cool. And it's holy crapola. Aes Sedai, Ashaman, I yield your eyes, that hammer. Now this. Who are you? A man who wants his wife back. All right. Chapter 5, I don't know that I care about at all, except something strange happens. Uh, it's just more of Fail. There is some the end of it to me is the most important part for what happens later, which is more interaction with Roland. Uh, and he's problematic, of course, but again, he's being rather gentlemanly here. He's being rather chivalrous of, yeah, it again, tying back to what we talked about Wednesday, you know, you should be flattered that he wants you, and you should be impressed when he respects when you say no. That doesn't mean he's a terrible person. It just means he's a guy.
Mm-hmm.
She says
Yeah, but
no. He continues to respect that.
his response is, "Baby, it's cold outside. Maybe you'll give me a second chance because it's cold outside."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
but that's problematic. We can't sing that on
Yes. No,
Christmas.
we can't sing that. It's the art of seduction is dead. It is now has to be a contractual exchange of consent.
You know,
Ugh.
I don't really listen to Ruben a lot anymore because I think he's just gone off the deep end a little bit. But one of the Augusts he took off, he came back, and Michael Knowles was the person who caught him up on the show to everything he
Oh,
missed in that August, and that was the year that "Baby It's Cold Outside" was made problematic, but "Wet Ass Pussy" was the song of the year. And so he read the lyrics of WAP to Dave Ruman on there. And the way he was reading it was like the William Shatner reading out a song. It was like,
uh what is I believe it's a is it an Arabic curse? May you live in interesting times.
Something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, if Scott or anyone else has any thoughts on these chapters that we just kind of skimmed over, we could talk about that next time. But for now, we have some spoiler things to briefly talk about. So go away if this is your first read, because part of the fun is trying to figure out all the connections.
All right. So we got the soothsayer comment that we
Yes.
didn't fully
Uh,
flesh out.
so just briefly, uh, at the towards the very end, the last Matt chapters, when Tuan finally finishes the marriage ceremony, he asks why, and she tells him, and is I think it's a pretty complete retelling. I don't know that she leaves, and we don't get a. It's not from her point of view, so we don't know, but you get the hint from like Rand. We never fully, I think, know what was asked and what the answers were when he went through the doors. But it hints at it over several times, and you do get the sense that Rand is holding back in parts. I don't get the sense that she's holding back. She's just saying directly, this is what is. Because I don't know that she would have any reason to hold back, especially now that the deed is done. Um, but she gives more or less verbatim because she speaks in kind of prophetic language when she talks about the things. There were like three things there were three elements to what the soothsayer, the nominee said. And so as I recall, there were like three elements, and she was not only said what was said, but then how she interpreted that Matt had fulfilled it. So well, that is actually something that we'll get at the end of the book. Where is all right? So did
You
you have
said
any?
the marks and orders on the Madral. Who's giving the orders?
Yes. Okay. So I mean, it shouldn't be a spoiler. It shouldn't be a surprise at this point. Um, that Taim is a bad guy. One of my thoughts, and I think this was something that was floated on the boards at the time, is this Taim doing this? Is he, because he's certainly a wannabe Forsaken, is he taking this? But I'd forgotten about they followed the order, so it must have been a Forsaken, which makes me wonder, is that a foolproof system or could someone fake it somehow? Um,
Well, my thing is they're using the ways. And Ishi did that in the beginning because he wasn't fully in the world yet. But they're all fully in the world. They could just travel.
no, they can't. We're gonna find that out here in a little bit, like in the middle of the book when we get to Rand. Remember the death gates?
Oh, that's right. They can't go through a gate. That's right.
For whatever
Yeah.
reason,
Okay. Yeah.
Shadow Spawn can't go through. And I think this is tying into your thesis of the whole series that I hadn't really thought of and have been thinking about more in depth with this reread, is how important the world of dreams is.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can't travel because traveling is a way of using the world of dreams to bridge the material world.
No, yeah, you're
And I
absolutely
don't
right. And
and
we don't
I
see Murdral.
suspect
We don't see Murdral in the world of dreams.
I
They are
suspect that Shadow
artificial.
Spawn don't have souls.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
exactly what I
why.
was about to say there. Yeah, they don't have souls, so they can't even cross that even microscopic barrier of the world of
Exactly.
dreams. Uh,
And Rand says when he explains the death gates after the fact that
in
they
fact,
will.
it may remove the soul that was used to make them.
That's right. There's a fragment of a soul there
Mm-hmm.
because they are made from human stock, but it's not, they're not real in that sense. And Rand explains that people all over the world in random locations will just find piles of Trolloc and Murdral just dead. That it did transport them, but it killed them instantly when they traveled through.
Okay, so so
I,
that eliminates my thought because I was gonna go to Paden Fane
I don't think we've talked about this, but
because he has power over Murdral.
Grendel is way more important than she seems because you have to infer that she's doing as much as she's doing. I think it's Grendel because there's a there's a brief POV of her after Samael's death, and she thinks something along the lines of she had she had jumped to not Karheen, Ilion to rummage through Samael's things because she knew he had found artifacts from the Age of Legends, and she wanted to one make sure there wasn't anything there that would incriminate her, that would tie Grendel to Samael. She didn't want anyone knowing that they had been allied, or that really she had been working for him because he duped her. Uh, and she wanted to see if there was anything useful there that she could use. So I suspect. Oh, I had this thought when we were talking about Bloodsucker McGee, uh, the Golem.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's the one issuing orders to the Golem. If it goes off of its existing orders of kill Matt, if anyone is giving it orders now, I think it's Grendel because she was connected to Samael and she went and rummaged through his stuff. So if there's some sort of mechanism or thing that is needed to contact or control the Golem, she probably has it. And I think she's the one also ordering the Murdral because she, and I feel like you get this later maybe with points of view of her. She is much more about self-preservation, I think, than any of the other Forsaken, which seems odd because they're all egotistical maniacs who, at least to some degree, the reason they turned to the shadow was for immortality. Because apparently living 1 or 2 thousand years isn't enough. They wanted to be immortal.
Well, yeah, on Balthamel, it says in the cheat book that that was his sole reason. So you don't have to look for a deeper
Mm-hmm.
reason with him.
So I feel like she is much more not just willing, but likely to be proactive about eliminating potential threats. And in a lot of ways, I think you see that um, with her kink. That it's she talks about that she's the ultimate communist of everyone in their place. That's what she uses compulsion for, is to make people live up to their true full potential as she sees it. But there's also an element there of eliminating threats because it's not just that she turns people of high station into her slaves for the prestige of it. I think there's also an element of self-preservation there of these are also people who would be likely to pose a threat to me. And so I think she's uh, willing and able to violate this no kill order if she can get away with it. And so I think she's the one directing the golem and the one who's trying to kill Rand. I do find it odd that Perrin is kind of left out here. That it doesn't seem like anyone's going after him. No, I take that
No, no,
back.
no. Morden showed both of them and killed them.
Yeah, yeah, but I was trying to remember
Well,
when
could
or
she have
if it
been
actually happened.
could she be the one that was ordering the Darkhounds too?
Well, but they weren't looking for Perrin because they passed him by. But then I
Mm-hmm.
remembered the big fight that happens in the next book, and it could be that she's the one who also sent those Trollocs who Perrin ends up having to fight in the next book. So I think
Okay,
she's the one doing this.
so I was just reading her bio here, and it's actually interesting. I wish I had read this one before. She was before the bore was drilled. She was the psychologist. She was
Mm-hmm.
she immersed herself in curing those with mental illnesses that the power and healing could not touch. And she was like a self-help person. Like, live a simple life, don't go stretch beyond your means, be happy with what you have, all this stuff. And apparently after the bore, she flipped completely to the opposite. So
To pure hedonism.
pure
Yeah.
hedonism, yeah. Interesting. I wish it detailed more why she flipped. It just says she flipped. Maybe all this was for nothing and I might as well, join it if I can't beat it, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
All right.
Oh, she
Um,
has something to do with Jane Farstrider too. Uh,
oh no, yes, because when Samuel first visits her, there's this old kind of scarred man in beat up clothes kind of sitting on a bench out of the way, and Samuel notices him because he's completely out of place. So I think she also had something to do with why his mind is messed up, not just Ishi. Because I think that was supposed to be Farstrider there. I think that was supposed to be Noel. And that's way back when that first scene where Samuel travels to visit Grendel. And
yeah, it says she sent him to Ibudar
yeah,
in
Lord
the
of
off
Chaos, I
chance
think.
that there would be something of her. Okay, so he was her spy to Samuel
Mm,
originally. So Jane Farstrider was supposed to be, or Noel is supposed to be spying on what Sam, or finding out what Samuel was doing.
because he's doing something in Ibudar,
Mm-hmm.
and she wants to know. And what he's doing is he's trying to find the stash that the kin have.
Yeah, I think I mean the book helps, but I think that could have been fleshed out more in the actual books
Yeah,
because
yeah.
without the cheat sheet you don't know that.
No, and I think that is a another sad failure of where the books ended up, because that was something that could have been fleshed out and revealed in scenes that we get of Noel and Matt in the next book.
Mm-hmm.
That just kind of all of that stuff. Matt's story in general with Sanderson kind of falls flat for me.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, he
and
said
he's
he didn't get
admitted
him
as
at
much. Yeah.
first, but then in the last book he didn't get him either because he made him more fun for the modern audience,
Yeah, I feel like
but it was completely out of character.
I feel like he was better in the second book. And I remember the second time I read through those three books thinking I feel like I can kind of pick out which scenes were more fully written by Jordan and then just fleshed out, edited, cleaned up by Sanderson, and which ones were more based on notes and Sanderson had to more fully write himself. And I feel like Matt is better in the second book and then goes kind of more back to where he was in the first book in the third book. And so I suspect that there was a lot more directly written by Jordan of the scenes that happen in that second book. But we'll get there in a little bit because we're rapidly approaching the end here. Which is where the last spoiler comes from, which was his comment, Scott's comment on he who comes after. And I hadn't thought about this before but we'll get there when we get there. But my recollection is I think Rand is Rand using um the sword that is not a sword in the end. I think he's the one who has it, doesn't he? And that's why he has Nynaeve and Moraine, because he needs them as a buffer for Kalendor. I think he
Maybe,
has it there at the end.
maybe. Hmm.
So it could be that Narishma was a red herring by Jordan, which he loves to do, and that yeah, Narishma went and got it, but he's not actually he who comes after. It's Rand who's actually the one using it and wielding it. Um,
Yeah, because that would be the most powerful sangreal left after the other
uh
two melted. Hmm.
yeah, and as Scott says, the scraps of poetry and history could be pinned by Rand after the last battle, and at the end we see him ride off into the virtual sunset. But we know Rand obviously has a long life ahead. Um, so there could be an element of that that we'll have to look at a little closer when we get to the end. Because there are a lot of oddities at the end, especially with where Rand is concerned, um, that I think are going to be more interesting and enlightening because of what you said and focusing on the world of dreams, because so much of what happens at the end happens in the world of dreams or kind of merged where there's this kind of weird overlap between the material world and the world of dreams.
Well, that's the bore itself.
Mhm.
It's that connection between life and death. And if the world of dreams is the hub, and on one end is death, and on the other end is the real world, then you would have to have that in between. I mean,
Yep.
you get that from the interactions with the Forsaken from book 2 on, where they're going into the bore and things are interacting like the world of dreams. The ceiling is
Yeah,
collapsing on them, and
that's a good point.
yeah.
All right. So one last thing real quick, because this actually ties into something I was talking about earlier, but I didn't want to derail us too much. Another fun thing I found on this wiki is Robert Jordan. So this article is um, basically just a long list of all of his interviews, signing reports, and letters. So basically, you know, from him directly, and it includes. There's a link here. Where is it? Oh, here we are. Searchable database. So you can either be a giant dork like me and just go through them all, or you can just click on the searchable database. And if you have, as we've said before, there have been many times we said, I wonder if Jordan ever said anything about this topic. Well, now we can go look if we can ever remember what those are. But I do. Where is it? Uh, Here we are. So this kind of ties into go away. All right. Uh, what I was talking about making buyer or making people understandable, but that doesn't mean they're sympathetic. Um, that he's talking about the difference between science fiction and fantasy, and we've gotten away from it. And this is from 1991, so this is the first one on the list. So the Great Hunt is just coming out. Uh, we've gotten away from a view of the eternal conflict between good and evil. Indeed, we see everything drifting through a shade of relativistic gray. While I agree there are many ambiguous gray issues, there is also good and evil. And the only areas of fiction in which the distinction is clearly delineated are fantasy and horror. And I think that really speaks to what he's trying to say on a meta overarching level through the whole series. So yeah, there's a lot of gray in here. There's a lot of, you know, this good guy's doing bad things or isn't very likable. This bad guy is understandable but still bad. Um, but it's all in the under the umbrella of the dark one versus the light.
Well, that's important because when you understand but still know it's bad, you can find what would drive somebody to do that. And without that, then you're just you're putting your head in the sand to the actual problem. Yeah, we get the end result with the character, Carradine, for example. We see the drivers that put him in the situation he was in, but it's too late for him. He needs to be dealt with. He needs to be taken care of. But we can prevent him from happening again. And that's the important takeaway. Some people, it's too late. Jeffrey Dahmer, it was too late.
Mm.
But if you understand his life and you understand what drove him to that, well, maybe you can identify that kid that could become him.
Yeah, good point. All right. Well, that's all I've got for today. Next Friday, next time on Wheel of Time, we'll be into some more fun because it'll be Matt, and so we'll really start getting into the courtship. Uh, we saw it towards the end of Crossroads that he's starting to see this now of, oh, this is just another kind of battle. So think about it in terms of tactics and strategy. And now
Yeah,
we actually get to see that happening.
and when you're thinking of Tuan, think of her and think of everything you know about Shanshan culture, especially from the tidbits you get from Suroth in her mind or Aegean in her mind,
Mm,
because then you pettiness can look different when you understand where it comes from. It's petty to us because we have a different culture.
mhm.
To her, it's normal life. It's actually her reaching out from her normal life.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know what we're talking about Wednesday, but for any of those who watch both, we will see y'all then.
All right, see you later.